Sanders from the block at the right tackle. This is Horton and intercepted. It's picked up by Chris Harris, the top-rated quarterback in pro football.
Bauer tipped in the air and intercepted. Picked off by Chris Harris.
And Chris Harris gets him again.
Now it's intercepted by Chris Harris, who's all the way home. What a comeback for the Broncos!
Welcome back to another episode of Bleav in the Broncos on the Bleav Network, sponsored by Bet Online. I'm Patrick Chiotti. I'm one of your two hosts of this program. Joining me, as always, is former Denver Bronco, Super Bowl 50 champion, Chris Harris Jr. Chris, always good to see you, man. How you doing?
Doing good, man. It's training camp time, you know. Guys' lives are gone and straight football now. So this is the time I used to hate, but I hate it's like a hate-love time period, you know, because you love playing football, but nobody wants to work 9 to 9, you know. So it's that time of year.
Training camp is here. Summer is over for the NFL guys. It's time to get back to work. Broncos camp is officially underway. This is the best time of the year for us fans, Chris. Like you said, not the best time for the players, but this is time to get back to work, and we get to see who is going to be on this 53-man roster for the Denver Broncos. This is another episode of our roster breakdown series. Last episode, we did the quarterback room. And Chris, this is the last episode, and it's the one that we've been putting off the most. This is the tight ends and special teams episode. It's still a good one, so stick around. We're going to be talking about the possibility of this being the worst group, and we're talking about the tight ends, the worst group on the roster as far as talent goes. Guys like Adam Troutman, Lucas Kroll is coming into just his third NFL season, really. Can Greg Dulcich stay healthy? These are all questions that we're going to answer on this episode. We're also going to be talking about special teams. It's not the sexiest part of football, but for a guy who lived and breathed special teams for a long time, I can say that it gets me very excited to talk about it. And the Broncos were pretty good at it last year. Chris, before we get into that, we have a message from our sponsors. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball to Formula One racing. I know that I'm going to be putting some money down on the men's basketball team for sure. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Use promo code BLEAV, that's BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. Bet Online. The game starts here. And Chris, where we're going to start with this dismal tight end group is last season. Not the greatest. We didn't get a ton of production. Adam Troutman only had 22 catches, 204 yards, a career-high 3 touchdowns, which is great. He's played in Sean Payton's system before, and he's really the veteran of this group right now. So, Chris, what did you see from Adam Troutman last season? They bring him back. He was a free agent at the end of last season. They bring him back for a short-term deal. What did you see from Troutman last year? And do you have confidence in him being the team's top tight end going into this season?
No, I don't have confidence in any of the tight ends. I think I do, but I do have confidence in him being a solid run blocker, serviceable receiver, Coach Payton will be able to draw him up something, in the red zone, be able to get him those touchdowns, But that's really what he is. Most teams, you'd probably be your second or third tight end, your run blocking tight end, and most teams, So him being our top guy, returning with only 200 yards receiving, 22 catches, 3 touchdowns, that shows you where we're at the tight end position. We're, our kind of wild card guy is Dulcich, and I don't know how many games he's played in the NFL. So, right now he's looking like what'd you say?
I said it feels like he hasn't played in forever.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So, other than his rookie year, I haven't seen him on the field, So, that's the issue that's going on. You got the run guy that we expect to be Troutman. We got our wildcat, our receiving threat tight end Dulcich, and the receiving threat guy hasn't been available. So we've been stuck with just serviceable run blocking tight ends without having that little wild card threat.
Yeah, and I mean, last season you had Chris Manhertz come in. He was a veteran dude, but that was a guy who was going to be a run blocker. He wasn't going to be anything more than that. He's not a big receiving threat downfield. And I feel like the hope last season was that Dulcich was going to improve health wise, and that he'd be available, and it just didn't happen. So you're having to rely on Adam Troutman, and then some of these younger guys. Nate Adkins, it wasn't really the big receiving threat. He was more of a blocking dude. He's kind of like in between a fullback. He reminded me a lot of Andrew Beck, like a less athletic Andrew Beck is what I would put Nate Adkins as. But and then Lucas Kroll comes along, later in the season, and he's got a couple of good games here and there. He actually ended up being one of the better pass catchers on the team. He was sixth in the team in yards per reception, which is pretty crazy, but only 8 catches on the season. So still some hope there, but this talent, like the talent in this room altogether, especially with the head of it being Troutman, it's like if Dulcich isn't there and he's not ready to go, this is such a big question mark for the Broncos. And I think that this is, we try not to look too far into the future, but this is an area where I definitely see the Broncos next season saying, all right, we have to get a really good tight end, either in this draft class that's going to have several really good tight ends, or in free agency. You look at teams like Detroit that drafted, Sam Laporta higher than, some people would have liked, but they got a guy who could do it all. He can block, he can catch, he runs great routes. That's the kind of guy that they're probably looking for. I don't see a guy like that on this roster currently. Dulcich is a great receiver when he's healthy, not the best inline blocker. He's not going to be a guy that, will pick up blitzes very well. Good blocker in space after the catch. Absolutely. He was a receiver at UCLA, and then he became a tight end, and you can see he's a really good stock blocker, really good at blocking corners and safeties in space. But outside of that, there's not much there. So they need to do it all tight end. I just don't see it on this roster. Chris, out of this group, who do you think is going to be the guy that is going to step up and be not like a superstar type of tight end? I don't see any of them being that, but who do you see stepping up in this group and being a key contributor for this offense?
Yeah, if Dulcich can't stay healthy, I'm gonna bet my money on Lucas Kroll. Right, he's still a big body, 6'6". He was with the Saints, so he has some familiarity
not
with
quite Jimmy Graham.
Yeah. Jimmy's like, I don't even know. Is he 6'7", 6'8"? I mean,
he's got to be pushing 6'8", dude.
Yeah, dude, he's tall, but I think Lucas can just can continue to build on what he did last year. He got some playing time, got his feet wet a little bit. Try to you always want to have a better year. Try to double the numbers of what you had last year. So he had 8 catches. His goal should be at least 30 catches. Trying to double that. And if we can one of these guys is gonna have to step up, because really I'm only counting Dulcich for 6 games.
I know.
Right, until he can prove me wrong or prove me wrong, and until then I'm gonna have to go with Troutman, Kroll, and I think Atkins is gonna be like that Manhertz role. He's gonna be the extra blocker guy. Usually keep 4, right? Yeah. So I see the Broncos keeping those 4. Next year should be one of the top priorities in the draft. I would say honestly. That probably depending on what we do with the end, because we have 2 guys that are going to be up at that position. So Those two positions will be the top priorities. And what makes a tight end important in the offense is the mismatches. Being able to find different matchups across the board. Usually when you can get a smaller DB on them, most smaller DBs struggle with the big body tight ends. You can kind of match them up, find different ways to get them the ball. And we just don't have that option right now. And we have it with the receivers a little bit, but you don't have that overwhelming matchup problem like how KC does, or what the Raiders are about to have with Bowers.
And Meyer.
Yeah,
They got two.
What the Niners have, the Lions, right? You have to have a guy that can to work those middles, and also you can stick them out wide versus a linebacker. So they're tight ends in today's games are they're kind of like your wildcat guy. Like you put him all over the field, fullback, tight end, X receiver, Z receiver, slot. Like you want a guy that can play all over the field, and we thought we were going to have that with Noah Fant. And unfortunately, he just didn't, it didn't work out. But we still got to find that type of weapon, because that's why if we didn't get Bo Nix, my next pick was Bowers, right? Because that's something I thought we needed. So that's something next year hopefully we can look into for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And man, shot me in the heart with the Noah Fant. Like, that was a dude that I was so excited for it. This was a big dude, like coming out of Iowa. Like, pretty much, if you have a tight end coming out of Iowa, 9 times out of 10 he's going to be a dog. But that 1 out of 10, Noah Fant. He had so much hope, and the talent, like the athleticism was there, but it didn't work out. And you're absolutely right. Think about, you think about the transformation of this position. For me being a tight end coach, that was one thing that I really had to lean on, was how can I make these matchups for my guys who I see their skills. I know their skills. I know what they're good at. And I think good coaches understand how to use those guys correctly. Think about how the Patriots played you guys with Gronkowski. I mean, they would put him out wide, and either, a Danny Trevathan would have to follow him. TJ Ward would have to follow him. You'd have to put a safety on him. That's the mismatch that you're looking for. And the good ones always understand how to attack those the best. So I think with a guy like Sean Payton, who has been really, really good with using tight ends throughout his career. We think about Jeremy Shockey. We think about Jimmy Graham. Jimmy was a kind of a unicorn type, not a great blocker. We saw that for sure. But God, he could stretch the field, right? And I think that's probably the role that they're looking for the most out of guys like Dulcich, Kroll, and the undrafted guy that they brought in from Utah, Thomas Yasmin, who has a rugby background. These are guys who will stretch the field. You can play them in the slot a ton, and they understand how to run routes well. They understand spacing, but you're not going to have to rely on them to block too much. So, Chris, Lucas Kroll has been getting a ton of praise from the staff this offseason. He was a guy that a lot of people saw come around late in the season. 6'6", 260, big body, athletic. If Dulcich can't stay healthy in 6 games, I agree with you. That's kind of the limit for my Dulcich love right now, is just 6 games. Could Lucas Kroll be a tight end long term for the Denver Broncos if he finds that role? Could he be like a Julius Thomas type, where you're not going to rely on him too much for blocking, but man, he can hit the seam hard?
I think he's probably better at blocking than I would say receiving from Lucas Kroll, just seeing him and seeing how he moves. Sure. Can he get open at receiver? Yes, because he's a big body and, he's still solid at route running. But I would see him more of a complete tight end, more of, not just like a receiver threat tight end like a Dulcich. When I see Dulcich, I'm thinking like, he's a receiver. I'm counting him as like an extra receiver on the field, a fourth receiver.
He could be an X.
I'm not counting that with Lucas yet until he shows me he has that, that quickness, you know what I mean? A different type of burst and quickness that you find from other tight ends. Right now, he's kind of, that big body tight end, run him across the middle, Get him to where he can run those little stops and body, the safety, smaller safeties and things like that, slants and things like that. So I see that kind of being his role. He's not like a guy like Jimmy Graham yet, where you're just going to stick him out wide and he's going to moss you. He's not doing that yet.
Not yet.
It's going to take some, it's going to take some creativity from Sean Payton to get these guys going, but he has to do it, right? Somebody, they got to figure out a way to find mismatches. And the way teams are doing it now, they're working the middle of the field. They're working the linebackers. They're working the safeties. They're using the running back and the tight end, right? Yeah. So we got to find ways to get these tight ends open. We can't have, 300 yards. How many yards total from the tight end position?
Yeah, it was like, let's see, Troutman had 204, Kroll had 95, and Adkins had 22. I think Manhertz only had 16. So yeah, just over 300.
Yeah, like
not great.
That's now if we compared that to other teams, right? That would be dead last in the league, right? So
not good.
We have to get more production from that position, and when we won the Super Bowl, it was huge for us because we had some solid tight ends. We always had good tight ends. From having a guy like Virgil, a guy that was key on special teams, right? Which Lucas will be a good guy on special teams. Troutman will have to play special teams. Atkins, all those guys have to play special teams, especially on this team because you're not getting 50 catches, right? No. So I expect all four of those guys to play special teams. They all have to have a role, and because they're not going to be the receiver type, guy that's getting a lot of catches, a lot of targets.
No, just for reference, looking at a Super Bowl contending team from last year. Mark Andrews, pretty good tight end, played 11 games and he had 559 receiving yards. 11 games.
And then what's the other tight end? Because I know they got another
Isaiah Likely. He came around and he had 461 yards. Both of them combined.
That's 1,000 yards.
Both of them combined over 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns. Use your tight ends. And I feel like Bo Nix is a guy who will use tight end. He used tight ends at Oregon very consistently. I think that this could be a good spot. If Bo Nix is the starter going into week 1, I'll feel a little more confident in him and our ability to use tight ends in this offense, but I won't feel great about the quality of the tight ends in this offense. So I think that you're absolutely right. Number 1 target next year, for the offense is probably going to be a pass catching tight end or a complete tight end. And there's going to be plenty out there in this draft class. There's going to be some good ones, especially a guy like Luke Lachey from, you guessed it, Iowa. Chris,
one more thing.
Yeah, go for it.
Let's give the tight ends a benefit of doubt, right? I've never seen Russell Wilson have a leading tight end receiver. I've never known him to be a guy that feeds the tight ends from just playing them, right?
No.
So I'm gonna give the tight ends a benefit of doubt under Russell Wilson.
Yeah,
we're gonna give y'all a new scratch, clean slate with Bo Nix, and let's see what y'all can do this year, right? Because I've never known Russell to throw to his tight ends.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember when Jimmy Graham got traded to Seattle? Do you remember that? That was interesting because before that, Russ didn't generally use tight end, and they force fed Jimmy Graham, and it just didn't work. It didn't work for whatever reason, but they force fed him, and I just feel like for Russ being the quarterback that he was the last couple of seasons, and it looked like he liked Dulcich a little bit in Dulcich's rookie year. That was someone that he could kind of rely on when Dulcich was healthy. But outside of that, the tight end usage was pretty much non-existent. So I'm kind of interested to see the change. And I think you're right. Let's give him a clean slate. Bo's going to be a different quarterback than Russell Wilson. So maybe he'll utilize tight ends in the NFL the same way that he utilized tight ends in the college game. But
Yeah.
now it's like, what are we going to get from this tight end group? So let me ask you this. What do you think? What do you think the best scenario is for this tight end group? Like, what would you say is a successful season for this tight end group, numbers wise?
Man, we got to get, I would say 700, 600 yards. 200 yards is like, that's really, really bad. I don't think people, when y'all listen to this and y'all really understand like football, like, yeah, that's terrible for a unit, right? And in today's NFL game where it's wide open and they're throwing the football all over the place, right? I guarantee, I'm positive that that's the lowest in the league, right? And that's probably the lowest Sean Payton's. That's probably the lowest that Sean Payton's ever had in his career. Probably one of his coaching lows from the tight end position. So my expectation is we need 600 to 700 yards, 10 touchdowns, right? If we can get that from these guys, that's much improvement. I'll be satisfied with that, right? But last year's is just, y'all were just out there, right? Running for the love of the game, and we can't have that.
We're going to clip that. Running for the love of the game. I love that. Just for reference, Adam Troutman's 204 receiving yards, Chris, 45th in the league. 45th in the NFL.
How many teams are there?
The 32. 32 teams. I mean, we're talking about guys like, obviously, George Kittle, Travis Kelce, TJ Hawkinson, those guys, they're top. Evan Ingram was up there in yards as well. But like, we're talking about guys like Will Mallory, who is like the third or fourth tight end on the Indianapolis Colts, 207 yards. Josh Oliver, a backup tight end in Minnesota, 213 yards. Austin Hooper, the journeyman himself, 234 yards last year with the Vegas Raiders. This has to change. And the tight end is such an important part of this offense. I'll go back and look for our next show, but I think you're right. I think that this was the worst tight end performance by a Sean Payton-led team in his career. And that even extends to his days in Dallas and his days in New York, when they had decent tight ends back then, but they were still giving those guys, they were still a big part of the offense. And I feel like last season, it just, like, all of the offensive woes because of the Russell Wilson, Sean Payton marriage, it just, as a student of the game, as a fan of the game, as a coach of the game, I was like verbally and visually frustrated a lot of games with our lack of usage in tight ends. Why are we not doing more to get these guys involved in the game? And maybe that's just because of the level of talent. But I think that this just means that, again, this is a position that needs to be addressed in the offseason. But Sean Payton also had a really good note in his press conference. And we'll move on to special teams right after this. But he had a really good note when somebody asked about the tight end battle. And he pointed out that they're not just competing against other guys on the roster. It's not Dulcich competing against Adam Troutman. It's not Kroll competing against the other guys. They're competing against the rest of the league. When cuts happen, Sean Payton is waiting. Lucas Kroll was a preseason cut last year. They jumped on him. This is the guy that they brought in. So he makes a really good point. There could be a tight end somewhere else in the league who is stuck on a team and just can't break the roster and gets cut. Broncos will bring him in. He's not afraid to do that. They're looking for him. Yeah,
they're looking for him. They're looking. Right now, Sean Payton is looking at every team. What tight end is on the bubble that we can come pick up? He's looking for that. If they're looking for any position, they're looking for a tight end right now. So I can't wait for you to go back and look at the numbers. And but that's what we got to need if we're gonna be a solid team, right? We need 10 touchdowns, at least 700 yards in the inside, because when Sean Payton flourished, his offense, Drew Brees flourished, he worked inside the numbers. right? And what I'm seeing
Yeah,
in the
and very
NFL
well.
is, and way Bo Nix is, he likes to work inside the numbers. So we
Mhm,
have to be able to mold the offense to be able to fit the way he likes to play. And that's
mhm.
using the tight end. That's using Cortland in the slot and running those seams like Colston, right?
Yeah.
That's using McLaughlin like Sproles, right? And
Mhm.
like how like the Lions are using their three guys in the inside, what St. Brown, Laporta, is that you say his name? Laporta,
Yeah. Yep.
Laporta and Gibbs, right? They're
Mhm.
working, teams are working the inside of the field more. So
Yeah.
we have to be able to do that and be able to fit Bo Nix's style play. And really,
Yep.
his style play is the same play Sean Payton likes to run, you know. So
Yeah.
it's important that we get a tight end that's reliable, especially across that middle.
And I'm telling you right now, Chris, I'm looking at, tight ends, the tight end depth charts from across the league. And there's already names that I'm like, oh, I'll keep an eye on this one. So I'll throw some names out there for,
Mm-hmm.
for people to go look at. Right.
Yeah.
So someone like Tegan, I'm going to mess this last name up, but Tegan Quitoriano, he was a fifth round draft pick in 2022 out of Oregon State, plays for the Texans right now. He's currently fourth on the depth chart. That's a guy that I would keep my eye on. He is solid. He was really, really solid. I would look at a team like Baltimore, maybe, who's got Charlie Kohler as the third tight end. Connor Hayward in Pittsburgh, he's the third tight end. Wouldn't mind having any of those. Will
That'd be a
Mallory.
nice pickup right there.
Will
That'd be a
Mallory
nice.
would be a fantastic pickup. Like,
Yeah.
there's guys out there, and I guarantee you that Sean Payton is just watching those cut lists. He's going to be watching them all the time.
Don't
Donald
be surprised
Parham.
if we bring in two guys. Don't be
Yeah.
surprised, fans. We bring in two new guys after preseason.
Donald Parham Jr. I don't know if you saw the
Donald Parham's out there too.
Hey, he's currently third on the Chargers depth chart, but I don't really see him fitting Harbaugh's system.
They're not
and what
cutting
he
him.
wants to do. But
They're
will he fit their system? So there was the trade that came out was like a three-way trade between the Chargers, Niners, and Broncos, which I don't think that would ever happen, but you never know. So basically, it was the Broncos get Parham, the Chargers get Ayuk, and then the Niners get Cortland Sutton. That was the trade, and I was like, I don't know about that.
We better get the first round picks with that.
But if they do move on from Parham, which it depends on what Harbaugh's looking for, because he does have a type. And I mean, he brought in Will Dissly and Hayden Hurst to be those tight ends. That kind of tells you what he's looking for. If Donald Parham's one of those dudes that gets cut, I'm right away. Bring him in. That's a dude I would absolutely love. Chris, we've been yapping about tight ends for too long. We didn't get to special teams. So here we go. We're going to cover special teams super quick. This Broncos special teams group, Chris, abysmal in 2022. Got really, really good last year under Sean Payton. Two questions, and these are the only questions that we're going to have for the special teams as a whole. One, how does this team continue to get better at special teams? And two, who is going to be the guy to replace Drew Sanders on special teams? Because he played the fourth most snaps on special teams, 295 snaps last year, and he is out for the season. How do they get better, and who's going to replace Drew?
Well, I was counting on somebody having to replace Drew anyways, because I had him. He was going to be my starting linebacker anyway. So, you can probably cut those special teams probably down 100, with him playing more on defense. But Griffin, we know we got to rely on him definitely to step up and play special teams. We picked up the guy linebacker from the Falcons. He was a special teams guru. Is the last name Smith?
Andre Smith. Yeah.
So he's a special teams guru, and some of these receivers, they're gonna have to step up and fill in. A lot of guys on the defensive side they're back on the special teams. So I think the special teams will be good because a lot of the same guys that played last year are going to play it again this year. right? Unless they get elevated to another role. And right now, a lot of those guys are kind of stuck in the special teams role right now. So I see the special teams continue to improve. Returners were great. We had great returns last year. Punt return team was great. Kick return team was great. Mims made, I think, probably like two.
Yeah, two or three.
I give him two or three.
Rookie mistakes.
Up. That's something that he can clean up and improve. But the kickers, it's gonna be, they always bring in extra kickers, extra punters, for some competition, just to keep them on their toes. Keep Riley on his toes, and let him know, hey man, we got this other guy he can punt too. So they can always keep those guys sharp, have a little camp competition. But I see us rolling with the same kicker and same punter, sprinkling in some of the new guys on special teams. But I'm not. This is the last group that I'm worried about is our special teams group. I think they'll continue to improve, and I think they blocked on the Pro Bowl level, man. I mean, Mims, a lot of times he didn't have to make a lot of shakes. He was bam, bam, one cut, he hit it. It was a wide open lane. So you got to give these guys credit on special teams the way they play.
Yeah, and with the adjustment to the different kickoff rule, this is going to be pretty interesting to see how the blocking scheme works. Sean Payton and Ben Kotwicka, they've been talking about all offseason, testing new things, seeing where, what they can do scheme wise, because this new kickoff, it's going to be different for a lot of fans. And I really advise all of you who are watching or listening, go watch the XFL and the UFL from this last season. Well, not from this last season because they reverted back to old kickoff, but go
watch. I don't know why they changed that.
I don't know why they did either, but I think
hopefully it's one and done.
I think it's going to be interesting because you'll probably see more explosive plays, less injuries, but it's still kind of keeping the kickoff, like the tradition of kickoff, right? You want to push, they're trying to push offense. So penalize the kickers for kicking it into the end zone, which
won't they just push the kickers back? Won't they just push everybody back?
Push the kickers back 10 more yards and then keep the coverage guys where they're at. The Broncos last season, they were the 11th best special teams graded team per PFF. And Chris, to your point about Andre Smith, 2 times this guy has played less than 200 special team snaps. That was in 2022 with Tennessee and then 2018 with Carolina. Everywhere else, he has played more than 200 special team snaps. So I think you're safe to say
he's in the league because of special teams. He's good at special teams.
He's a solid special teamer, and I think this is a good pickup for the Broncos. You did mention the punters. Quick note on that. The Broncos do have 2 punters on this roster, Riley Dixon and Trenton Gill. Riley Dixon was really good last year, though. All things considered, he was 14th in the league in return percentage. Gill was 19th. Riley Dixon was 2nd in the league in yards per return. Gill was 31st. 5 touchbacks for Riley Dixon. He was 20th in the league. Gill had 8 touchbacks, tied for 25th. The only thing that they're really close in, Chris, Trenton Gill has a 4.28 hang time. Riley Dixon has a 4.29. So I think it's just camp competition. Keep 2 on the roster. But I think Riley Dixon is going to be the guy. So Chris, we finished these episodes. We've been building our Broncos roster, our own 53-man roster, and we'll talk about that in the next episode when we get into camp. But who are your 4 tight ends? And I think we know who the special teamers are, but who are your 4 tight ends?
I'm gonna go with 2.
2.
And we're gonna pick 2 new ones.
Okay.
Actually, I'm gonna go with 3. I'm gonna go on the safe side.
Okay.
I'm going to the safe side.
Let's do it.
I'm gonna pick 3. And we're gonna pick a new free agent from the preseason cuts or a bubble cut.
I like
roster cut thing like that. So I'm gonna go with Troutman because we know that he has the most security. Right. Dulcich because they're gonna give this guy so many chances because he's a draft pick, right?
Yeah.
When you draft a guy, and so you gotta extend as many chances as you can,
Sure.
right? So I'm gonna go with Dulcich, and now I'm gonna go with Lucas Kroll, right? Because he's a mix in between. He can play receiver and he can block. So he's not kind of guy that can do both. And then it's gonna be a free agent, right?
Okay.
It's gonna be some guy he's had production in the league, but he's just he was a bubble cut, maybe a salary cap cut and a late cut that he's gonna find his way on our team. So those will be my 4 guys.
I like it. Yeah, I'm gonna go with. So I'm gonna go Troutman. Obviously, I think Kroll makes the roster as well.
You don't like the Dulcich?
Man, it's so difficult because I want to. I really, really want to. It's just like, is he even going to be healthy by the time?
Can he make it through training camp?
Yeah. So I'll say Dulcich for now, but I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to go in a different direction, and this one's I'm going to give you 2 different ones. Johnny Munt, who played with the Rams, and he's on the Vikings right now, but they've got a really deep, TJ Hawkinson's going to be on PUP, but Josh Oliver, Robert Tonyan, N'Keal Harry, Trey Knox, they just got him. So I think Johnny Munt could be a cut, also an Oregon Duck. And then, you know what? Taysom Hill. Don't be surprised if it happens. Taysom Hill, if he gets cut, because they just drafted or they signed Dallin Holker out of Colorado State, the Saints did. Don't be surprised if Taysom Hill gets cut and then he ends up as the Denver Bronco. I'm just going to throw it out there. It's not what I want, but I won't be surprised.
I would want that. That's what I would want.
I think it would fit. Hey, that replaces our Zach Wilson theory from the last episode. But this is also a guy that could play special teams. So I think it's not terrible, just at what cost. Yeah. So that has been our roster breakdown series. We're done. Chris, camp is here. I'm so excited. Our next episode, we're going to be talking about the recaps from these first few days of camp. We're going to be talking about who stood out, who is getting a little bit colder. I've heard some good things about Javonte Williams. All I'm going to say, I'm pretty excited. Make sure that you follow Chris and I on Twitter at Chris Harris Jr., at Patrick Chiotti. Follow at Bleav Network as well. Make sure that you subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on, and go ahead and go to the YouTube. Follow us over there as well. You can find this whole series on the YouTube channel. It's really great. Had lots of great guests. Chris, next week, we've got a big guest. My childhood quarterback, Jake Plummer. He's going to be coming on the show. Jake the Snake. I'm really excited. Chris, Jake, any closing thoughts?
Man. Oh, no, man. Like you said, man, it was fun going through the positional breakdown and giving the fans, insight of what we think how the roster is going to shape out and how what's our expectations from each guy. So I think it's a great guide, man. I think shout out to the fans and all the listeners. Make sure y'all tune in. And this should be a good guide for you going into the season, going into training camp to really see where this team's at.
Very exciting. For Chris, for all of us here, thank you so much. Go Broncos.